The evening sun filtered softly through the curtains, painting the living room in hues of orange and gold. Emily Parker sat on the couch, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of chamomile tea. Her son, Daniel, had been quiet for weeks, and though she tried to respect his space, her heart ached with worry. She had raised him mostly on her own after her husband, Richard, passed away 5 years ago. Daniel was her world, her reason for waking up each morning, and lately, the silence between them had felt heavier than words. Daniel was 17, a senior in high school, and for most of his life, he had been a gentle, thoughtful boy. He wasn't the type to slam doors or shout at his mother. He was polite, respectful, and even as a teenager, he carried himself with a quiet maturity. But lately, she noticed how often he lingered in his room, how often his meals went untouched, how quickly he retreated when she asked how his day was. The boy who once told her every silly thought now seemed like a stranger living under the same roof. That evening, the air outside had grown crisp with the first signs of fall. Emily lit a cinnamon-scented candle, hoping its warmth might coax some comfort into their home. She heard Daniel's footsteps in the hallway and braced herself. He paused outside the living room, as though unsure of whether to speak. Finally, without a word, he turned and walked back to his room. Emily exhaled, her chest tight with helplessness. Later, when she was folding laundry in her bedroom, she heard a soft knock. Turning, she saw Daniel leaning in the doorway, his expression torn between fear and resolve. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk? Just us in private." Emily set the clothes aside and nodded, her heart thudding. "Of course, honey." Daniel stepped inside and closed the door gently, a deliberate act that made her realize this wasn't just a casual conversation. He took a seat at the edge of her bed, his hands clenched together, knuckles pale. She sat beside him, resisting the urge to pull him into a hug. Instead, she gave him space, waiting for him to speak. "I've been keeping a lot from you," Daniel began, his voice shaky. "Stuff I didn't think you'd understand. But it's been eating me up, and I can't hold it in anymore." Emily reached out and placed her hand over his. "You can tell me anything, Daniel. You know that." He swallowed hard. "I know, but this is big, and I don't want you to be disappointed in me." Her heart twisted. "Sweetheart, you could never disappoint me." There was silence. Then slowly Daniel opened up. He told her about the pressure he'd been under at school, how his grades had started slipping, how teachers kept reminding him about college applications, and how everyone seemed to expect him to have his future figured out. His best friend, Tyler, had already been accepted early into a prestigious university, and Daniel felt like he was falling behind. He admitted that he had been pretending to be okay, smiling through the stress, but inside, he felt like a failure. "I didn't want to say anything because Dad always used to talk about how strong I was," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "And I thought if I told you I was struggling, it would let him down. And you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Daniel into her arms, holding him as tightly as she could. "Oh, my sweet boy. You don't have to carry that weight alone. Your dad would be so proud of you no matter what. And I am too every single day." Daniel sobbed quietly into her shoulder. Years of unspoken fear and pressure seemed to pour out of him in that moment. For Emily, it was as though a wall she didn't know existed had finally crumbled. When he calmed a little, she brushed his hair back gently. "Daniel, college isn't about living up to anyone's expectations. It's about finding what makes you happy. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. Nobody your age does, even if they pretend to." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I know, but that's not everything I needed to tell you." Emily tilted her head, concern etching her face. "There's more?" Daniel hesitated, then continued. He told her about the nights when anxiety kept him awake, when he'd stare at the ceiling wondering if he was enough. He admitted there were moments he felt invisible at school, overshadowed by kids who seemed smarter, faster, more confident. He confessed how lonely he sometimes felt, even surrounded by friends, and how he wished his dad were still there to give him advice. Emily listened without interrupting, her hand never leaving his. Every word he spoke was like a window opening into his soul, and though it hurt to hear his pain, she was grateful he trusted her enough to share it. When he was finished, she said softly, "Daniel, thank you for telling me all of this. I can't imagine how hard it was to keep it inside. But you're not alone, sweetheart. We'll face this together. Always." For the first time in weeks, Daniel smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. I feel lighter just saying it out loud. They talked late into the night. Emily shared stories of her own struggles when she was his age, how she had once felt lost, how she didn't get into her first-choice college, how she cried in her dorm room the first week away from home. She admitted she didn't have everything figured out even now, but that life had a way of working out if you stayed true to yourself. Daniel laughed through his tears when she told him about the time she had accidentally signed up for a calculus class in college, only to realize she had no idea what was happening. I dropped it after 2 weeks, she admitted, and it was the best decision I ever made. I realized it was okay to change my mind. Their conversations stretched for hours, weaving between tears and laughter, fears and reassurances. By the time they noticed the clock, it was well past midnight. The candle in the living room had long since burned out, and the house was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping softly against the windows. When Daniel finally drifted off to sleep, curled up on the bed beside her, Emily stayed awake for a while, watching him breathe peacefully. She thought about how brave he had been to open up, how much strength it took to admit his vulnerabilities. She whispered a silent thank you to Richard, wherever he was, for raising such a thoughtful son with her. From that night forward, their relationship shifted. Daniel no longer bottled up his worries. He learned to talk about his struggles, and Emily made sure to listen without judgment. They set small goals together, not about grades or achievements, but about balance and joy. They planned weekend hikes, cooked meals side by side, and even started a little garden in the backyard. Months later, when college acceptance letters began arriving, Daniel opened them with a calmer heart. Some were rejections, and though they stung, he didn't crumble under their weight. One spring afternoon, he received an acceptance letter from a university that wasn't the most prestigious, but felt right for him. Emily watched his face light up as he read it aloud, and she realized that his happiness mattered more than any ranking. At graduation, as Daniel walked across the stage, Emily clapped until her hands hurt. When he found her in the crowd afterward, he hugged her tightly and whispered, "Thank you for listening that night. It changed everything for me." Tears filled her eyes as she held him close.
No, sweetheart.
"Thank you for trusting me."